Okay, folks. Well, thank you for joining us at the fifth session of our HR training series. This one's a little bit different in that we are going to be going not just over farm labor hiring HR principles, but also going through a variety of grants and loans that are related to growing your farm business generally. So hopefully these tips are useful for you, just so you know if you're like others who are saying you're here because you're hoping to hire your first employees, and maybe you didn't attend our first 4 HR sessions. If you send me an email or let me know, I'm happy to share the videos and recordings of those when they become available. There is just one short survey to fill out in order to access those if you haven't done so already. We are really excited by our guest speakers and presenters today who are going to walk you through in a way that hopefully shows how these kinds of grants and loans programs you can apply for are not that daunting, and they've had success, and we hope that you will as well. So the sort of stages of this session. Oh, if you happen to be unmuted at all, just make sure you're muted during the session. If you have any questions throughout the presentations tonight, feel free to put either your question or comment in the chat. And at the end of each presentation, there'll be a few minutes to ask that presenter a specific question. And then we will have the larger question period unrecorded at the end of this evening's event, when you can ask questions to any or all of our presenters tonight. So what we want to do today is go over a few things first before we introduce our presenters, mostly sharing some of the resources that you should have all received in your email package, and then we'll pass it over to our experts for them to share their experiences on grants and loans. Love that people are still throwing information about themselves in the chat. So I think we can go to the next slide now, Camille. Fantastic. Okay. So the big thing here, folks, is to think through a variety of different considerations whenever you're about to apply for a grant and loan. First of all, I think it's really important for you to identify what your farm actually needs. Like, do you have some issues with being able to afford having labor on your farm? If so, do you need to find some employee training or wage subsidy grants? Maybe you have some infrastructure or equipment needs that can be met through various different federal or provincial loan or grant programs. Maybe you just need some finances to help market your products. Knowing what you need first is important, and then making sure you then search out the variety of grants and loans. You'll see in a minute the spreadsheet that Camille has prepared with a number of the grants and loans that are available to farmers throughout the year, typically. And you need to look closely over those grants and loans first for whether or not your farm operation is eligible for those grants and loans. If you're not eligible, then you need to move on to a different one. That's sort of the first requirement. And then you need to really spend some time showing how you can jump through the various hoops and requirements to meet the conditions of that grant and loan as you're writing it. Getting support is always super important. I write lots of grants and loans for the National Farm grants applications for the National Farmers Unions Ontario, and I'm always needing to run past my grant applications with as many eyes as possible to try to ensure that I'm not missing anything, because these grant adjudicators pretty much often will look through something, and if you're missing a single piece of documentation, you go into the discard pile. So having someone look over and make sure that you have a thorough documented application is super important. And the biggest piece of advice that's probably the most important here is that the first time is always the hardest. Once you start writing these grants, typically you can recycle a lot of the information that you've prepared for your first grant application for subsequent grant applications, which makes things a lot easier. You'll have most of your documentation on hand, your business number, that sort of thing, to just make it go smoother. Okay, Camille, I think we can jump to the next slide. Okay, hopefully you have all received this. You've received it either both as an Excel spreadsheet and a link that you should be able to access to an online Google spreadsheet. A lot of grants right now have already passed for this time of year. But you'll see that in this spreadsheet, we list the various different types of grants that are available to farmers, both labor-based and infrastructure, environmental improvement grants. And we talk a bit about whether they're subsidies, loans, etc., how much money you can get from them, whether there are any eligibility requirements. A lot of the employment ones, for example, restrict you to hiring youth. So that typically runs for people under the age of 30. And any deadlines that might be available, and any details. And again, let me see if I can pull it up here. And then Camille has also put together, I think it looks a lot nicer as a Google spreadsheet, a little checklist moving over on the side where you can check off whether you are eligible for each of these grants, whether you've submitted it, the amount requested, and your status. So you can kind of keep track of your own grants and loans that you've been applying for, to make that easier for you. You'll also see, I don't think there's another slide for this. If it is, Camille, you can move it forward. But you'll also see that we've created a Google Calendar with dates and deadlines. So if you use your own Google Calendar, you can sync this to your own calendar, and it will provide you information of when deadlines are coming up. And if you staff are going to populate and update that throughout the year. So whenever you're interested, you can just take a look at that in your Google Calendar as an add-on, and hopefully identify and not miss deadlines, because who needs to miss a deadline when you really need an employee to come in? We just actually, I think the Yes grant closed just a couple of days ago. So we should have ran this session a week ago, and then everyone could have got support they needed with their Yes grant. All right, I think you can move to the next slide now, Camille. Okay, I think we are ready for introductions of our presenters, and I am going to pass it over to Camille.
Amazing. Hello, everyone. So it's my pleasure to introduce all the speakers tonight. We'll start with Justin. Justin is a seasoned leader, passionate about empowering teams and fostering innovation across the local food and farming sectors. As co-founder of MarketBox, a B Corp certified local food hub, he expanded the enterprise to 3 stores, supporting over 150 farmers and producers. Under his leadership, MarketBox was twice recognized as one of Canada's fastest growing companies. In 2023, Justin was named one of the top 50 change makers in Canada in the Globe and Mail's report on business. His leadership experience spans diverse sectors, including launching the first public avalanche bulletin system for the Yukon and leading avalanche forecasting teams. Justin also co-founded Batched, an e-commerce technology company empowering food entrepreneurs. He brings a collaborative approach and is dedicated to advancing the Fair Finance Fund's mission of supporting local food and farm businesses across Ontario. Akos is the head farmer at re.Planted Urban Farm based in Deep River, Ontario. re.Planted is the network of underutilized urban lawns turned no-till regenerative market gardens. She grows flowers for weddings, supplies local shops, runs an 80-person flower CSA, and fulfills daily retail flower orders on just under 3,000 square feet of growing space. Matthew of Heart City Farm grew up just outside of the city of Ottawa and always had an interest in working outside and growing food. After studying international development and working in community development and the trades, Matthew decided it was time to join forces with Madeline, the other half of Heart City Farm, and give farming a shot. You can often find Matthew cooking up a storm and grooving to music, going on adventures with his pup, or reading a good book with a cup of coffee. Jeannie is a former educator who started farming as a second career after buying her family's 150-acre farm in Moose Creek in 2023. Harvesting primarily hay, she hopes to add fruits and berries, to develop a native plant nursery, and to incorporate native grasses into her hay and pasturing. Her initial projects with Ontario's Soil and Crop Improvement Association were focused on species at risk and obtained 75% cost sharing for a half-acre wetland restoration, native grass and forbs planting, and a wildlife corridor. Jeannie believes that programs to compensate farmers for providing ecological services to their communities will become a valuable way to combat climate change and habitat loss. And that's our speakers.
Amazing, Camille. I'll let you get the screen back up and on, and then I think, Jeannie, you're up first for presenting.
Right, okay. And I'll check the time when I start.
Sounds perfect.
All right, okay. Right, so we just had the introduction from Camille. Yes, I bought my family's farm 2 years ago, and there were a number of environmental projects I wanted to do in addition to farming. If you could just go to the next slide. So in particular, we were interested in doing a wetland project because the area around Moose Creek, it's a village southeast of Ottawa, had a lot of wetlands in the past, but most of them have been drained for agriculture. So we thought it would be nice if we could restore a small part. And there's a part on the property that's used as pasture and that had some natural springs. So we decided to try to get funding, cost share funding through SARFIT or through the SARFIT program, which is offered by Ontario Soil and Crop. If you could just go to the next one, please. So we put in, we obtained funding from OSEA through their SARFIT program to put in a half-acre pond along with seeding for wet meadows and upland meadows of prairie grass and forbs. If you could just go to the next. And as I've already said, we're hoping to contribute ecological services to our community. So we looked for this funding to support it because the cost is quite large and you have to set aside a part of your farmland. So we wanted to, or we hope to get some support. And when I looked into it, there were some good grants. So if you could go to next, please. So Ontario Soil and Crop offer a number of cost-sharing funding opportunities. I've listed 4 different sets of programs that they offer: SARFIP, SARPAL, RELP, and OFCAF, and there's a number of others as well. They're all very similar. They fund similar types of projects. There's just slight variances in the amount of cost sharing they give, as well as how they run the funding slightly, but they're all very similar in terms of the projects they fund. Also, they all expect you to put the money or to pay the money first, and then you do a claim afterwards for which you're remitted. And I know that can cause people anxiety, because I know it caused me a lot of anxiety because you have to put the money up front first. But I just want to reassure people, and hopefully I will, that it's actually a straightforward process. And Ontario Soil and Crop, they're there to help you, and they actually want to, they really want to support you. So they make it as easy as possible. Okay, next. So the one we used or applied to was SARFIP, which is the Species at Risk Farm Incentive program. And through this one, you can get 40% cost share to a maximum of 15,000, but you can get even more, 75% cost share, if you're able to provide prove direct benefits to species at risk, and if you agree to a monitoring plan. So, and this will give you a max, you can obtain a maximum of 20,000. So we were able to obtain the SARFIP at the direct benefits. And this, along with Ducks Unlimited, provided sufficient funding to put the whole project into place. Okay, next. Another Oh, sorry, that I don't know how, yes, that should actually be SARPAL funding. Another one of the opportunities through Ontario Soil and Crop is SARPAL funding. It provides 50% cost share up to 40,000 per program year. And I mentioned them because they've just started intake yesterday. So if you're interested in these kinds of programs, and you're thinking you might want to put in, some kind of environmental best management practice on your farm, it's a good place to start. Okay, next. So these are some of the projects. We don't have time to go through them, but these are some of the projects that are eligible for the cost share funding opportunities, whether you go through SARFIT or whether you apply through the SARFIT program or RALP or SARPAL. Things like tree planting, a lot of stuff for fencing if you're raising cattle, rotational grazing systems. So a lot of really good opportunities with good funding. The main thing to note, however, is that they basically allocate on a first come, first served basis. So it's important to get in your application as soon as possible. So that's, but a good thing is, they're not trying to take the best proposal. Like if you meet the requirements, you'll get the funding as long as they haven't used it, they haven't allocated it all yet. Okay, if you could go to next. So the application checklist. So what do you need to make an application to Ontario Soil and Crop for a project in one of these programs? And all the programs, the SARPAL, SARFIT, like they all have this exact same criteria in terms of your application. It's just, like I said, the cost sharing can be slightly different and the times they open are slightly different. Okay, next. So first of all, you have to have an environmental farm plan in place. And that's probably the most time consuming thing to do. But I mean, is if you're willing to take a little bit of time, it's very doable. And again, as I said, they're really there to support you. And there's a number of different ways you can do your farm plan, whether through a course facility, through an in-person session, a virtual session, or a self-guided session. But as I said, the facilitators really do work to help you. They'll guide you through, and they'll evaluate your farm plan really quickly. Mine was returned to me within a week, and I had the certificate within a week of completing it. So it's fast, and they like if you don't understand stuff, they explain it. If you're in the in person, the facilitator, I actually saw her. She was going around. She was telling people what to put down for their plans, and so it's not like they're trying to make it hard. They really want people to put the farm plan in place, and they want people to apply for this funding. So they're very supportive. Okay, so next. Okay, we can just skip this one next. Okay, and then the second thing you need to have in place is a site plan for your project. So here is the plan that Ducks Unlimited put together for me, but you can also do your own. If you could just go to next. This is the one I did for my other application, which was the corridors connecting wildlife. I just used Google Maps, and then I marked on the screen. The picture's a little bit faded here, but I just drew on the corridor showing where the windbreak and grasslands would be going. Okay, next. So you need the farm plan, and then you need to put together for the actual site plan for the project. Then you need to have a cost breakdown because when you fill out the application, you have to indicate how much each of the items will cost. Okay, next. And then if you're doing the applying for the SARFIP, and you want to get the additional cost share for species at risk direct benefit, they ask you to do a habitat self-assessment, which is basically a questionnaire where they ask you to describe the different types of habitat you have on your farm, and also if you know the surrounding habitat in like the general area or location that your farm is in. Okay, next.
Couple minutes, Jeannie.
Yeah, okay, I'm pretty much finished. And then here I just put up, here's some species at risk that we documented on our farm. Snapping turtle, meadowlarks, bobolinks, and barn swallows. Okay, next. Okay, so that's pretty much what you need for the cost share funding opportunity. As I said, the environmental farm plan, and then a breakdown of your costs, a site map showing the perimeters of the project, the habitat self-assessment, and then two things I didn't go through, the PIN number of your farm, the premise identification number, and if it's relevant, a letter of support, like one from Ducks Unlimited. Some of the projects need them, and some, like tree planting, don't. So it's again, so just to wrap up, I just want to emphasize it seems slightly involved, but if you are interested in doing an environmental project on your farm, it's well worth the effort, and it's completely doable. I mean, it's just you just have to follow their process and give them what they're asking for, but it can be done, and they're very helpful. They'll help you at every step of the way. And then in terms of remitting the money, like I was so worried about that, I admit it, because it was like 20,000 for the excavator and all the seed. It was so I had to put that money out up front, but they remitted it. Like I didn't believe I would get it till I actually got it, and then I was so happy. So, you have to submit your claim after the project is finished. So, and you have to have the appropriate receipts. But they were very helpful, and I even missed one of the documents I needed to submit with my claim, but they just contacted me and told me, and I sent it in, and it all worked out like really well. So it was a very positive process for me, and it went quite smoothly. And the funding is good. One other thing, if I have time to mention, is in terms of your breakdown of the project costs. One of the good things about this, because we investigated a number of funding opportunities, one of the things we really liked about this one is that you get to stay in charge of your own project. Unlike with Alice, where they do everything. So some people might like that better because they don't have to worry, but I much preferred this one because I could control the project and find my own contractor. And that was great. And the other thing, which may be of interest to some people, is in terms of your cost breakdown, you can cite in-kind payment. You can request in-kind payment as well for the farmer and the farmer's family and dependents. So you can and that's like relevant for a lot of things, like if you're seeding or if you're tree planting, you can claim up to $25 an hour for the actual labor and $75 an hour for the tractor operation. So if you have kids who are interested in the environment, like my son did some of the tree planting, although he's a bit lazy towards the end, so he didn't do as much as he should have. But it's a good opportunity for them, and they can be paid for it, and that's in my opinion, it's entirely legitimate. We're contributing ecological services to our community, and I think they should be recognized and encouraged.
Thank you
So,
so much, Jeannie, for demystifying some of the OSDIA cost sharing and grant programs. We've got time, I think, for one quick question in the chat before we move on. Kelly, I'm wondering if you can answer this question quickly from Kelly. It's does a monitoring plan for the grant require an external source, like a local university or Ducks Unlimited, to do the checks? Or can the landlord or farmer themselves submit the monitoring reports? Do you know if you did you
uh,
submit the monitoring reports yourself or did you have an independent?
no, what they do is they send out a biologist, so there's no cost to you. I haven't had it monitored yet. From what I understand, is they send a biologist out to check periodically, I guess over a number of years, basically to see how well the program is working. The only time I had experts was when I wanted to first prove that I did have species at risk. And in that case, I got a letter of support from a local bird watching group who came in and identified like some birds on my and so they could write me a letter. But no, the program administrators send out a biologist to do the monitoring.
Amazing. Thank you, Jeannie. We'll circle back to Jeannie
Okay.
again, and you'll be able to ask her some more questions, but we're going to move on to our next speaker.
Hi everyone, good evening. My name is Akos, and I am the farm steward and owner, and I guess also florist at re.Planted Farm and Floral Studio. Camille already introduced me, so I won't get into the nitty-gritty of myself, but we'll be touching a little bit on what we do on our urban farm as we go through the Carrot Cash grant in terms of how it helped us as a non-traditional farm to get funding. So Carrot Cash is an organization or is a grant fund that's run by the Big Carrot. It's a grocery store in Southern Ontario. I think most of them are in Southern Ontario. And they've allocated funds to fund a couple different projects that I'll kind of get into in terms of their funding goals. But one of the things that was great is that it's good for small farms like myself, or large farms to add alongside their other funding sources for larger projects. So we are a non-traditional farm. We're not on traditional farmland. And because of the nuance of our business, finding farm funding is very challenging. And then because it's home-based, technically, because I live here, it's also challenging to find business funding. So Carrot Cash is kind of that perfect middle ground for us. So we've used them up to the maximum they allow, so three times. And they fund projects up to $5,000. So we've received $15,000 from them over the past 5 years or 4 years. We didn't get a grant this year because that we had already exceeded their limit. So their funding priorities are mainly for I don't think this is restricted, but I don't think it's restricted to this group, but they do prioritize members that are either that face systemic barriers. So either Black, Indigenous, people of color, people with disabilities, people who are part of the LGBTQIA plus community and remote communities. So in my case, Deep River, Ontario is considered remote, and then obviously I'm Black, so I did qualify in both of those categories. And what's key is as I wrote my application, when I was discussing about me, about the farm, my project, I really made sure to emphasize or integrate those the like prioritizing, for example, in our area being rural, we don't have access to certain produce and certain products, and letting that kind of flow through the application so that I could again meet their funding priorities and qualify. They fund regional food economies, local organic agriculture, community food strategies, and broader food system initiatives. So it's very broad what they do. So I found that it was very easy to cater what we were doing to their priorities. And why I like Carrot Cash is because you don't need to be a traditional entity. Like I said before, it's great for startup farms, small businesses. They also fund nonprofits, co-ops, community groups, etc. So their funding is quite broad. At the beginning, we technically weren't registered. We hadn't hit the revenue to have to register, so we weren't registered, and we still were able to get funding from Carrot Cash. Their application is very easy as far as a lot of grants go. I've applied for a lot of grants. Their questions are straightforward to answer. They're not, I didn't have to call anyone from their organization to ask questions. It all was very straightforward. They had a very prompt turnaround as well in terms of getting the funding. They gave me the money up front, which is really key. It's really hard when you're starting up or when you're small to put up that cash up front. And then it's great if you don't have access to other funding sources. In fact, they want you to state that because they prioritize people who don't have access. And also, if you don't own the land that you farm on or have any other major assets, that's advantageous with Carrot Cash. So in terms of steps to apply, they have a preliminary inquiry form on their website, and a basic outline of your project. They give you questions to ask right on their website. How much do you want? Why do you want it? Et cetera, et cetera. Very brief overview. And then based on your answers to this, then you'll be officially invited to apply. So, of course, not everyone is invited to apply, but it's only then, once you've submitted this, they've looked it over, then you can apply. They usually have, they used to at the beginning have two streams that you could apply during. There was a December, January stream, and then June, July stream. It seems like they've removed the summer stream, and now there's only the December, January. So it's already passed, but there's something to look forward to for this upcoming December. And then once you are officially invited, then they give you the application form. And it's a Word document, very easy with all the questions you need to answer. You can answer them right in the Word document, then save it as a PDF and send it back to them. And so you're generally sharing who you are, of course, detailed. You want to make sure that your answers cater to, again, those funding priorities. So I really like to reiterate, use the language that they use and on their website, really understand what their funding priorities are so that I can cater my application. The terminology on the application is key to their priorities. What does your farm do? What is your project? The impact it'll have, what it'll cost, and how you plan on allocating funds to pay for it. So that's generally the application. That's what you're answering. Of all the grants that I've applied for, like I said, I found Carrot Cash to be one of the most straightforward in terms of their questions and their requirements. And so, what I like to do, or what I recommend, having gone through this 3 times, is make sure you prepare in advance. So, have your project breakdown and cost ready, along with your other funding sources. This was a little tip that someone who would receive the Carrot Cash grant shared with me is they want to see you allocate the grant funds across a variety of items. So, for example, our first fund or our first request was for wash and pack station, and a greenhouse. And I made sure to cater that as I broke down the project, the line by line, to list some of the most like minor expenses, just so they can see just how all the costs or the grant would be spread across all of these different layers, because that really helps buffer your application. And then have your a balance sheet and income statement ready. If you don't, they give you a template. So I did use my own income statement because I already had that made. But then I used their balance sheet template. And again, very easy, very simple to use as well. And then the project impact. This one's a big one. So again, the same past recipient shared this tip with me. Really make sure that you understand Carrot Cash's funding goals and their priorities. And it's to improve and create change within the local food system in Ontario. So again, us being rural, I tended to really focus on the fact that we lack access to a lot of things out here. And so we want to improve that access. A lot of our market is seniors and youth, and so incorporating some of those more disadvantaged groups into the target market, which already was existing, or which is already our existing market, but really highlighting that in the application is really important. And again, tailor your impact, the impact of your project to meet their funding objectives. So that's key. They really want to see that your impact, the impact of your project, it's really going to benefit your community. It's going to enable your farm to not just make money, because of course it's important to make money, but they really do want to, again, increase access to local food systems. So keep that in mind. And then thirdly, post-funding documentation. Once I received the funds, which I think was about 30 days after my application was approved and accepted, um, I got a check in the mail, deposited, and also this portion is also the simplest I've ever seen for any grants. I find a lot of grants once they approve you before they give you the money. There's a lot that you still have to do, and then post documentation, post funding documentation is also quite involved. Carrot Cash was again the most simplest that I've ever encountered for any grant. It's simple, just share what the project outcome was, what you learned, and a few images to go along with it. And so this is just one Word document. Again, they send you a template with the questions. You just answer it, save that Word document as a PDF, and send it back. So when I first applied, it took me about a week or two to prepare everything. It was my first time, of course, starting from scratch. But in subsequent applications, I used my previous application as a template. So that allowed me to complete the application in just 2 days. And then you can receive the grant up to 3 times, like I said. So Carrot Cash pretty much is what has allowed our very, very unique and unusual business to get to where it has. So I'm very appreciative of them. And they're constantly emailing their recipients saying, please share that our applications are open now, because they really have the funds to allocate, and I don't think they're getting enough applicants.
Fantastic, Akos. I think we all learned so much from that, and what a great plug for Carrot Cash. There was one question in the chat here for you on just a clarification question, I think, and now I've lost it. Where is it? Why? Maybe it was deleted. It was a question, if I recall, it goes about what you meant by you weren't yet registered. Was that a farm business or a business number that you hadn't registered yet?
Yeah, so I can't register as a farm business
Right.
because of just, again, we're on residential property. We don't really qualify. I mean, we do when we file our taxes, but not. as a farm business. It's weird. It's a weird gray area that we're in. So yes, it's the business number registration. Registering your business in Ontario. And oh,
It's just someone I'm muting here. It's all good.
oh, okay. So yeah, we weren't registered with CRA Canada or CRA or the province of Ontario. So in our first year when we applied, and we still were able to receive a grant. We did register in the following year because we hit the revenue numbers that we needed to. So yeah.
Well, just a great example of how Carrot Cash is meeting a need of folks that are just starting out or are in this gray area, as you suggest.
Yeah.
But doing important work of growing food in rural communities. So thank you so much for that. All
There's
right.
one question that just popped up. I don't know if you want me to
Yes,
answer it now or
please
later.
go for it. We've got a few minutes.
Okay, so it said, did you apply any of the projects more directed towards your flower business or 100% the food side of your business? So, oh, I don't know if that was mentioned, but we grow both flowers and veggies. So we catered at the beginning, a lot of our projects were towards 100% the veggies. So, like a cooler is obviously for veggies, but you can also use it for flowers. But at the time, that was our main production. Our main production was veggies. So that's what we did mention the flower component in our business and our application, but the main component was veggies. As we started to move more towards flowers, I did have to just be mindful of the projects that I was choosing to fund. So, for example, one of them was upgrading our workshop space. And it was really important that I emphasized and really highlighted our farm to fork dinners, for example, which is more food focused, and that one is more community oriented. And we also do a Grow Your Groceries masterclass, which is more sharing how to grow to the community. And we do those workshops not just on our property, but we go and present those. So that was the main focus of those. But then we kind of double dip, I guess, because the workshop space that we upgraded, we do also use it for flower workshops as well. So it was just what proportion of your business, what proportion of the project is going to be food or flower related. And we made sure to always choose a project that was would enable the 50% that was veggies to grow and reach the community further and so on.
Incredible. Well, I don't know about everyone else, but I want to jump on the car and go on a road trip to Deep River and see re.Planted Urban Farm. All right. Our next presenter, it's over to you, Matthew.
Hey, I would just ask that everyone bear with me a little bit because I've been fighting off a bad cold for the last few days. But aside from that, super happy to be participating in the discussion tonight and thankful to our colleagues at the NFU for putting this series together. I guess my goal would be to highlight some of the key aspects of the YESP program, the Youth Employment Skills Program, which we've successfully participated in a few times now, and then to speak a little bit more specifically to sort of fitting the application process into what is usually an overloaded farm schedule, maybe highlighting a couple areas of concern that jump out from the application, and then if possible, speaking to some of the issues of framing and how that might be useful or not useful when you're putting an application together. Granted, this will probably flow a little bit more organically than that. I will say we're going into our 11th season of growing. And for that whole time, we've operated without land ownership. So our first 5 years, we were an urban farm, so growing exclusively on residential property. And for the last 5 years, we've taken on the lease of a farm in Ottawa's Greenbelt. So we now live and grow in the same place, which is cool, but don't own the place. So sometimes, as has previously been mentioned, that can factor into eligibility criteria for various grants and programs, not necessarily for YESP. But anyway, that's been our experience this whole time. I will just mention, so we lease this land from the federal government, and the Crown occupies that land on unceded Algonquin territory. So the Youth Employment Skills Program is delivered by Agriculture Canada. It's quite a broad-based program in the sense that it's national. It has a lot of funding behind it, but it's also open to quite a wide array of organizations, not strictly sort of operating farm businesses. So it's more or less any organization that delivers some form of agricultural programming. And it operates as essentially as a, well, it's a $14,000 grant that operates as a wage subsidy. So it's, as was outlined in the NFU's sort of spreadsheet there, certain proportions up to $14,000 of the salaries that you're paying out to successful applicants. It does have a couple of tiers to it. There is, similar to the Care Cash, priority awarded to applications that tailor or cater to youth that face barriers. So in the typical sort of diversity and inclusion type of language, Indigenous Canadians, racialized youth, remote communities, that same sort of list applies, but it's certainly not exclusive to those subsets of the youth population. It's just in some cases priorities, and additional funding can be provided to those applications, so that if that's not part of your HR strategy or where your business is at this time, where your farm is at, that shouldn't discourage you from pursuing the application. It's important to note that the website is really well designed and well involved. So there's lots of good information on, like, they break down all the eligibility criteria. They have a very involved application guideline. And conveniently, they do have email notifications. So if you're concerned at all about keeping up with those sorts of deadlines or having it get lost in the whirlwind of it all, that can be a convenient function. Although now the NFU might have one-up them with this handy Google Calendar. I should point out that there are sort of two phases to the approval process. So essentially there are eligible businesses or organizations, and then within that projects, so you're applying on a project basis. And then if you are approved, if your farm and your project is approved, then there's a subsequent application process for the actual candidate for the youth hire that you're putting forward. And then also, if you're concerned at all about the remittance schedule or sort of weathering the sort of the financial burden over time, if your project extends 6 months or longer, there is the option to have a midstream remittance, which can be quite helpful. Yeah, I think that's sort of the liner notes of the program itself. Obviously, being a youth employment and service program, as mentioned before, like, it's only open to participants that are between the ages of 15 and 30. I personally find that somewhat problematic and doesn't really align with where we are in contemporary society, but that's more of a discussion topic. The application itself can seem a little bit involved, especially when it delves into the various aspects of applicants facing barriers. But again, it's sort of a tiered application, so you're not required to tailor it to those aspects. And because it's open to a wide variety of organizations, like, it does lean into this language of project, but you don't necessarily need to parse out a specific aspect of your business organizations to cater to the application. Like, if you're operating a farm business, hiring a crew member to work in the field during your upcoming growing season, like, that is more than a sufficient agricultural project to satisfy the requirements of the program. Really, the only sort of stipulation there is that it be a physical undertaking. You can't bring someone on to do sort of a research project or to do administrative or clerical work. Like, they have to be physically engaged in hands-on skill development, agricultural work. As far again, sort of getting back, to the barriers aspect. So whereas for regular applicants, they offer up to 50% wage subsidy to a maximum of $14,000, there is an additional 30, so a maximum of 80% if you're hiring a youth that's facing one of the barriers that they identify. And then there's also an additional sort of potential $5,000 in accommodation costs that is potentially available. I would suggest that sort of just the way that the application is designed, there's not really a lot of room to use sort of framing language to sort of tailor the application one way or the other. Like, if that's an avenue that you're interested in pursuing, I think it's an important one. But if it is one that you are pursuing, they're really looking for more substantive and demonstrative processes that your business has in place to actualize that kind of hiring practice. So it's less about sort of invoking the language that's associated with accommodating that kind of hiring, and more about actually having a concrete plan in place for how you might go about doing that, instead of just suggesting that you are open and wanting to do that. I mean, aside from that, it is like the way it's set up is it's essentially multiple choice questions, like does this or does this not apply to you, and then some longer answer questions. When it comes to our project design, as I've mentioned, we basically just frame it as honestly as possible. Like, we are bringing on new team members to help with our growing season, and like, we do emphasize the fact that we're local market, fresh market oriented, that we emphasize regenerative and organic growing practices to the extent that that's beneficial to our applications. I can't actually say, I'm not privy to that information, but it's important to us, so we emphasize that. And even if, let's say this aspect of barriers isn't something that you're doesn't lend itself to where your farm is at this time, or whatnot, it can be a very useful, or I found it to be a very useful exercise, just in terms of opening that conversation with yourself and your team, and sort of a good cause for sort of reflection and considering how you might want to emphasize different aspects or change direction in how you're growing your team and developing your business over time. I think I might, aside from again suggesting that this is a very useful program, it is quite accessible. There's no real reason to be intimidated by the application. It's just as useful for new farm businesses as it is for established farm businesses. There's different ways that you can rationalize it to yourself. Like, certainly, I mean, we used it in the first instance when we were first hiring someone, so that definitely took some of the edge off, some of the uncertainty there. If you're trying to achieve living wage, that's something that's important to us. This can help you sort of rationalize those additional costs, so there's lots of lots of opportunity for good discussion and reflection within your own farm team there. That could come out of this kind of application. So yeah, I would, although the deadline has unfortunately just passed, anyone who has not taken advantage of this, I would keep it in your back pocket and definitely circle back to it next time around. And again, those email notifications can be signed up for at any time, whether the application is open or not. But yeah, I think I will leave it there.
That is amazing, Matthew. Thanks. We've answered a few questions that came up in the chat, but there's a couple more that I don't think we have answered yet. So one was the first one was whether you've ever tried to access the accommodation funding. If so, do you know how it works?
So we have not. I will say we've only submitted applications for the non-barrier hires, but like these are costs that you undertake up front. It is quite detailed on the website as well, but in particular for remote communities or for other socioeconomic aspects, like there's additional funding ordered for relocation, or even if there's certain technologies or like augmentative technologies, even just in terms of like a phone or like workwear, right? Those kinds of things can be applicable. The proportion of funding for that is the same as for the salary, but again, similar to the salary, those costs are yours to bear upfront, and then once approved, then they are remitted.
Super informative. Thank you, Matthew, for doing this even while you're sick here. There's one other question maybe before we move on. I think we know the answers to these, so they're probably pretty quick, but let's just get it from you directly. One was, do the staff you're hiring have to be considered underemployed in order to be eligible?
Yeah, so that's a good point to bring up. Yeah, on the employee applicant side, like the two main criteria are youth, so 15 to 30, and either unemployed or underemployed. So you can sort of see in effect how it is sort of geared towards students, but underemployment is sort of a broader criteria than it might appear at first glance. Like it could be something as sort of straightforward as, only currently working part-time and not full-time, but it could also refer to someone that's currently working a job regardless of how many hours, but in a field that is either unrelated to schooling or training that they otherwise have, or that is is sort of, for lack of a better term, sort of entry level, or that doesn't require any type of sort of formal training or accreditation.
Amazing. Thank you, Matthew. The final question, I think for now anyway, is so with like Canada Summer Jobs, for instance, they have a minimum requirement of weeks that your hire has to work. Is there a minimum amount of weeks or hours that you have to apply for with the YES program?
To the best of my understanding, no. There's more just because again, it's sort of, like you couldn't have someone work for a week and suggest that you've paid them $7,000 a day or $1,000 a day in salary. That wouldn't jive. But basically, it's there's like a calendar year, more or less, that the project is eligible to take place within. So it's generally the 1st of April to March 31st of the following year. And it can be, yeah, it can essentially unfold any duration within there. Again, if it's 6 months or longer, you then have that option to receive a midstream remittance, which is definitely something that's beneficial if it, yeah, if that works for your particular project. But yeah, strictly speaking, I don't believe there's a minimum time. But again, the website is, if this seems like something that's worth pursuing for you, it's quite detailed.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Matthew. Super valuable, and glad to know that you've been successful so many times, which means that hopefully other people on this call will also be successful next time the Yes Grant rolls around. All right. Next up, we have Justin, who's already been introduced. Justin is not an active farmer, but works with Fair Finance Fund and is going to share with us all kinds of great information on what Fair Finance Fund does to support local farms and food. Over to you, Justin.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Camille, and thanks to NFU for having Fair Finance Fund and myself speak tonight. And thank you to everyone who's still hanging out as we move into the final hour of this talk. So Fair Finance Fund, we have been operating since 2018, and we're a social finance fund specifically focused on lending and mobilizing capital to the food and farm sector in Ontario, and particularly farming and food producers focusing on regenerative small-scale production with ecological and social goals in mind. So we've to date we've funded everything from small scale farms to uh, food markets to breweries, wineries, co-ops, non-for-profits, and then of course for profits. But they all kind of share a similar mission, which focus on social purpose of local production and local food. Okay, if you don't mind the next slide, Camille. Thank you. So to date, we've deployed over 60, I think we're more like 65 or 66 loans, and that equals about $4.4 million in funding. And of those clients, 27% are BIPOC, 50% are women entrepreneurs, and 80% of our clients really prioritize organic and ecological methods. And I say that because this whole talk is, geared towards um, how to get over the hurdles of accessing funding for your farm. And so for us at the Fair Finance Fund, we really look for clients with mission-driven stories and mission-driven business plans. And so these indicators at the bottom of the screen from the UN are the ways that we measure impact to the fund. So to have a successful application with Fair Finance Fund, clients who really pull that out of their business plan and provide a story of trying to do good in their community and try to build great jobs, provide social capital, and also have an ecological focus tend to be more successful in our application stream. Next slide. So why might you need a loan? So the more common reasons are for startups, capital for starting up your business or starting up your farm, or for equipment purchases. And then another common use is for expanding your farm. So maybe getting into a new product line, launching a new sales channel of your farm. And then historically, we've also provided financing for times between grants. So that's more geared towards non-for-profits, but we have seen that in small farms as well. And we do provide working capital as well. And next slide. So when you're applying with the fund, and I think this can be said for a lot of these grant streams and other funders, is really telling the story of what's the purpose of the loan, like why do you need the capital, um, and telling us the story of the project. So really focusing on what you're going to be using the money for, and then equally as important is how showing the funder how you're going to be able to repay that. So showing the business development, the go-to-market plan, what markets you're going to be engaging in, and how those revenues are going to help support repaying that loan over the term of the loan. Okay, Camille, next slide, please. Thank you. So just quickly, I won't bore you with all the details, but some of the items that you would need for funding through Fair Finance. So a business plan, cash flow forecast. We usually look for a 3-year forecast, and we're generally asked for tax returns if applicable, and we look for about 2 years. And then we really want to see quotes for what the loan is going to be used for. So if it's for equipment, like a walk-in cooler or a greenhouse, we want to see specific quotes from those vendors that supply those equipment. Articles of incorporation, and then taxes that are paid are all just sort of common things that funders look for. And the one thing I will note is that we've recently removed credit check from our application process. So we're finding it's a barrier for entry for some of our clients. So that's been a positive thing for the fund and for our clients. Okay, next slide, Camille. Just a quick overview of how our process works. So if you go on our website, fairfinancefund.org, you'll find a quick preliminary application that takes anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes to fill out. And that's really just to screen clients to ensure that their goals of their farm or their food enterprise meet the mandate of our fund. Within a couple days, you'll probably hear back from us with whether you've been approved to submit a full application. And on that full application is where people like myself and our team really try to help you along that path. And so there's often a lot of questions, and we're really there to help. We want people to get approved. We want to support these projects. And so it's a real back and forth collaboration approach that we take. And then provided your full application is approved, it goes to a loan review committee. So there's a third-party entity that we use, a group of volunteers that have a background in farming and finance. Provided that's approved, you'll have a site visit from one of our team members, and then we'll be ready to deploy the loan. Next slide. So I think the one thing that really what we makes our fund stand out is that we're really about character-based lending. So we're not that sort of evil lender corporation. We try to work with people. We love the story of what you're producing, why you're doing it, what impact is that having on your local community. And those are the type of things that get our applicants approved for the loan, and what our team is really passionate about, and our investors are very passionate about. They want to hear your story. So I just wanted to highlight that we've removed a credit check from our process there. Next slide. And then one of the other benefits of working with us, along with obviously the capital that you need for your project, is that it comes with a mentorship program. So we provide up to 10 hours of mentorship. That could be with helping you with finances, helping you with business operations, logistics, growing plans for your farm. That could be marketing and go-to-market plans. So a whole host of different mentors that have specialties in those different aspects of your business. And we try to team you up with the right mentor for whatever you're looking for help. And then just a few more advantages. We really do provide assistance during the application process. So we're there to help you. We help you stay on track with your debt repayments. We're constantly kind of in conversation with you during the lifespan of your loan. And we're a transparent, affordable financing option. So it really we don't feel like a bank, is what we're told by a lot of our clients, that we're actually part of their team, and we're there to help them. All right, and the next slide, Camille. And then finally, just a little recap about the fund and what we offer. So we offer loans from 20,000 to 200,000. Currently, it's at 7.5% fixed rate. Um, we also offer a 3-month grace period for repayment. So a lot of our clients choose to use that right at the beginning of their project, and that helps them sort of get started without having to worry about that repayment right away. And then another thing that really makes us unique is we don't ask for any collateral for loans below $100,000. And then all of our loans, generally speaking, are on a 5-year repayment period. And then there's an annual reporting, and that's part of our impact measurement, and that's how we gauge the impact of our clients collectively. And then for us, we are able to communicate that to our investors who invest in the fund and provide the capital for our loans. And yeah, this is just a thank you to all of our partners and funders. And next slide. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm Justin at fairfinancefund.org, and you'll find a lot of information about the fund on it. And yeah, I'll leave it there.
Amazing, Justin. Thank you so much. There's one question in the chat here for you at the moment, and that is the financing for is financing for land eligible?
So currently in our main fund, it's not. Um, However, we are revisiting that. We are launching 2 new emerging funds that are sort of a subsidiary of Fair Finance Fund. One of them is called the African Canadian Farmers Fund, and that fund is specifically built to help provide a land acquisition tool for African Canadian farmers. It's not quite operational yet, but we're hoping to start deploying capital later into the spring. So no, not yet, but in the future, likely.
Amazing. Thank you. Next question for you, I think, is again for you, Justin. Do you help fund finance startups?
So that's a great question. That comes up often, Vanessa. Short answer is shall say, we have on a few occasions, but we generally try to look for clients with at least a bit of a track record. And particularly, we want if you haven't, if it's just you're just starting your own farm business, but you have a lot of farming experience, that very much would weigh on our decision for funding. So it's more about the experience in the sector or experience in that particular business that we're looking for, so that we're maybe not just funding someone with no farming experience at all.
Great. Thank you, Justin. I'm going to hit stop on the record now, and we're going to stop our screen.